In a quiet winter town where the snow seemed to remember every footprint ever made, a little girl with a worn coat bent down to save a life smaller than her own. That one moment set into motion a journey of courage, compassion, and unexpected family. Before we begin, I want to know something from you. Tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from today? I love seeing our community growing from so many places. And if you believe in stories of second chances, loyal hearts, and the miracles that sometimes arrive softly, please press subscribe to support this channel so we can continue bringing you these gentle, hopeful stories that warm the spirit even in the coldest seasons. Silverpop in late January lived under a hush of pale winter hush, as if the town itself had taken a slow, white breath and never fully exhaled. Snow lay across rooftops like sheets of quiet linen. Street lamps glowed amber against the gray, and the wind carried a mournful whisper down the narrow lanes. On this winter afternoon, beneath skies that looked as though they had forgotten sunlight, little Hannah Lowe trudged through town with a wooden sled trailing behind her. Hannah was merely 6 years old, slight in frame, with thin arms and legs that looked almost too fragile for this world. She had curly, russet-brown hair tucked beneath a knitted cap with missing threads, and eyes of hazel green that carried too much quiet understanding for a child who had not yet learned multiplication. Her coat had once been pink, but now faded to uncertain beige, frayed at the sleeves and thinned around the elbows, a garment that had clearly seen too many winters and too few repairs. Hannah's personality, though tender and quiet, held an unusual resilience. She was the kind of child who rarely complained, who learned early that tears didn't always summon comfort, and who loved anything smaller or weaker than herself, from fallen sparrows to dented tin toys. The sled she dragged behind her held plastic bottles and crushed cans she collected for recycling, a small task she had undertaken ever since her mother, whose name was once whispered around town, but now rarely spoken, had gone missing from their lives 2 winters ago. Hannah's father, Michael Lowe, had retreated into silence afterward, leaving Hannah to learn small lessons of responsibility on her own. Michael was not cruel, merely broken. A man who worked long hours at the lumber mill, came home tired, and often fell asleep in a chair rather than engage with the world. Hannah did not resent him, she merely grew quieter. As she turned onto a side street near the abandoned maple tree lot, where old houses sagged like weary memories, she heard a faint sound. It was a trembling noise, not quite a whimper, not quite a cry, too soft to be human. Hannah stopped. The wind brushed past her, scattering flakes across her boots. She listened again. There it was, a thin, shaky whine drifting from somewhere below the line of sight. She left her sled and followed the sound. There, under a broken slat of fence bordering the old Jensen property, lay a small German shepherd puppy. He was tiny, likely no more than 3 months old, with oversized paws and ears still too large for his head, already hinting at the noble posture he would someday grow into. His fur was a mixture of sable brown and charcoal black. Though much of it was muddied and stuck with frozen clumps of snow, his ribs showed faintly beneath the grimy coat, hinting at hunger. His eyes, soft amber, carried a look of desperate hope, as though longing had taken shape inside them. This little dog had no collar, no tags, no sign of belonging to anyone. Just a trembling body and a yearning gaze. Hannah slowly knelt, careful as one would approach a wounded bird. She extended her hand toward him, small fingers chapped from winter air. The pup did not bark or snap. He only pressed his cold nose into her palm, breathing a tiny sigh, half relief, half exhaustion. Hannah felt the vibration of his shivering through her fingertips. "Hey there," she whispered. "You're cold. Are you lost?" The pup did not reply, but his silence carried the answer. Hannah, though young, possessed empathy that came from somewhere deeper than her years, perhaps from loneliness, perhaps from loss. She gently brushed snow off the puppy's fur, revealing a faint scar near his hind leg, perhaps from a scrape or accident. He nuzzled closer, small tail giving one timid wag. "You're not alone anymore," Hannah murmured. The words came from her instinct, from her heart, and though she was too young to understand the significance, she still felt it. For a long moment, the world was simply the hush of snow, the cold wind, and a child comforting a creature smaller than herself. Silverpop, a town of older folks and quiet habits, moved on in its usual hush, unaware that something gentle and meaningful had begun beneath a fence. Hannah carefully shifted her body so that the puppy could crawl closer. She examined him the way a miniature guardian might, noting that his pads were cracked, that his fur was damp with meltwater, that he seemed exhausted. But she also noticed something else, a stubborn vitality in him, a will to endure. This dog, though shaken, had survived something, abandonment perhaps, and still hoped for warmth. The last rays of a colorless afternoon filtered through the drifting snow, and Hannah's tiny hand stayed against the pup's side, sharing what little heat she had. She didn't think about the sled behind her, or her father at home, or the icy wind finding ways through the holes in her coat. She thought only, he needs me. And for the first time in a long while, she felt needed. A car passed nearby, tires crunching in slush, but no one looked their way. Silverpop could sometimes be like that, busy enough to move, too quiet to notice. Hannah picked up the puppy, gently, like he were a secret, and held him close to her chest. He shivered, then relaxed in her arms. She tucked his body inside her coat, sharing her small warmth. The puppy gave a soft puff of warm breath against her collarbone. Snowflakes gathered in Hannah's hair as she stood. She looked down the road leading deeper into the frozen dusk, not yet knowing how her life had shifted, how this moment beneath the fence had drawn a new thread into her story. But she knew this. She would not leave him. With slow, careful steps, she walked back to her sled, puppy cradled beneath her coat. The cans and bottles in the sled clinked faintly. But now they seemed trivial. She had a new companion, a new purpose. And as Hannah crossed the street, disappearing behind a drift of snow, Silverpop continued breathing its soft, white breath, unaware that under its winter veil, a bond had already been formed, one that would change more than a single life. For Hannah whispered, with certainty of a promise, "It's okay, you're not alone anymore," and the small German shepherd, nameless still, rested his head against her heart. Evening had begun its slow descent upon Silverpop, and though the sun was nowhere to be seen, the snow reflected what little light remained, giving the streets a pale silver-blue glow. Hannah had tucked herself into a quiet corner near the old train stop, holding the puppy, now warmed by her coat, close against her body. The child's breath came slow and misted, drifting into the dusk like small prayers. In towns like Silverpop, where not much ever seemed to happen, even the wind sounded ordinary. But tonight would not be ordinary. From further up the sidewalk came the crunching rhythm of expensive winter boots, deliberate, confident, unhurried. Chase Langford entered the scene like someone stepping into a stage spotlight. At 16, Chase was tall for his age, lean but athletic, with the posture of someone who had grown up being told he was destined for greatness. His blonde hair was carefully styled into an effortless mess that actually required considerable effort each morning. He wore a dark navy winter coat, expensive, down-filled, with a silver crest stitched on the sleeve, the kind of coat that quietly announced, "I have more money than you." And beneath that exterior was a personality molded by privilege, entitled, impulsive, fearless in the way only someone insulated from consequences can be. But there was more to him, a frustration behind the eyes, a restless energy that came from being raised by a father who never said, "I'm proud of you," only, "You must do better." Chase spotted Hannah crouched beside the fence, noticed the small bundle of fur in her hands, and something hardened in his demeanor. He wasn't driven by hunger or cruelty exactly, but by the instinct to assert dominance in a world where he often felt powerless despite all his wealth. He called out, voice sharp, "That's not your dog!" Hannah turned around slowly, the puppy shifting slightly under her coat. Her little face reflected surprise, confusion, then a timid resolve. She didn't know Chase personally, only by reputation. He was the boy people whispered about, throwing snowballs at car windows, starting fights at school, shoving smaller kids without warning. He had never targeted Hannah before. She was too small, too quiet, hardly noticeable. But tonight, she was visible because she had something he wanted, the easy victim role. Chase walked forward, steps kicking up snow. "Move, I said move." He was not yelling, which somehow made it worse. His tone was casual, dismissive, as if speaking to an object, not a person. The puppy trembled harder in Hannah's arms. She could feel it, like a fluttering heartbeat against her ribs. Hannah didn't speak. She simply held the dog tighter and angled her body to shield him. The image was almost mythic, a small child protecting a smaller creature, not through force, but through quiet courage. Chase stopped only 2 feet away, towering over her. He stared down at her, brows pulled together in annoyance. "You deaf or something? I said get lost. That dog's not yours." Hannah finally spoke, her voice soft but steady. "He's cold. He needs help." Chase scoffed. "He needs me, not you. Give him here." He reached forward. Hannah pulled back. That tiny act of resistance, barely even a gesture, triggered something in Chase. Perhaps it was pride, perhaps embarrassment, perhaps insecurity. Whatever it was, it twisted his intentions, sharpened them. He moved his leg, ready to kick, not the girl, but the pup, a cruel signal. "If I can't dominate you, I'll hurt what you love." In that moment, the puppy let out a frightened yelp, and Hannah instinctively curled around him like a shield of fabric and bone. She squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for impact. And then, a voice cut through the winter air, strong, commanding, slicing through whatever violence might have transpired next. "Police! Stop right there!" It wasn't a question, it was an authority. The command struck the air like a hammer of authority, freezing motion and thought alike. Chase's leg halted mid-swing, and Hannah's eyes snapped open. The puppy gave a soft gasp-like sound, sensing a shift in the battlefield. The wind carried the echo of that single word: police. Along the sidewalk, a figure approached through the snowfall, authoritative, measured, unmistakably official. Officer Mason Reed stepped into the dim glow of the street lamp, each step purposeful, leaving crisp imprints in the snow that swallowed footsteps seconds after they were made. Mason was 33 years old, of solid build, not bulky, but strong in the quiet, dependable way of a man accustomed to responsibility. He stood about 5'11", with chestnut brown hair trimmed professionally short, and a neatly kept beard that gave him a serious, seasoned look. His eyes were slate gray, observant, calm, the kind of gaze that took in details before speaking. There was a steadiness to him, an aura that suggested he had seen harder nights than this, and had walked through them with composure. He wore the standard Silverpop police uniform beneath a thick, reflective winter jacket, zipped up to the collar. A badge gleamed on his chest, gun secured at his side, though he had never been quick to reach for it. Mason preferred resolution through words first, restraint second, force last. Years earlier, he had served as a K-9 officer in a larger city, until a wounded partner and a hard call changed his career path. He didn't talk about it often, but those who knew him said that moment gave him 2 things: an unshakable respect for the loyalty of dogs, and an intolerance for cruelty disguised as mischief. Beside him walked Hunter. Hunter was no ordinary dog. He was a retired police German shepherd, 7 years old, with a thick sable coat and proud posture. He was larger than average for his breed, face wise and serious. His left ear bore a small tear, a remnant of a confrontation during duty long ago. His amber eyes held the knowledge of someone who had stood between danger and the defenseless before, and who would do so again without hesitation. Though no longer actively serving, Hunter retained an alertness in his stance, a poised readiness. The leash that Mason held was not a restraint, but a symbol of partnership. Hunter didn't bark, he didn't growl, he merely existed with presence, and that alone shifted the atmosphere. Mason's voice came again, calmer now. "Chase Langford, hands where I can see them." Chase froze completely. The arrogance that flared only a minute earlier drained from his face like water from a cracked jug. He raised his hands slowly, palms upward. "I wasn't going to hurt her. I swear." Mason held up a hand, stopping the excuses in midair. "I didn't ask what you weren't going to do. I asked you to keep your hands visible." Hunter took 2 steps forward, positioning himself, Enyi, between Hannah and Chase, not aggressively, but deliberately. His tail was still, his gaze fixed, the message projected without a single sound. "I am watching you." Do not test me. Hannah, still crouched on the ground, stared at Hunter with awe. She had never seen a dog stand like that. Tall, proud, protective. The puppy in her coat peeked out, eyes wide. It was as if Scout instinctively recognized Hunter as one of his own, a full-grown guardian of their kind. Mason approached slowly, eyes flicking to Hannah first. "You okay?" he asked, voice softening. Hannah nodded. She didn't speak. She just held the puppy tighter. Mason then turned to Chase, who stood rigid, trying to gather the scraps of his fading bravado. "What exactly were you doing here?" Mason asked. Chase ran a hand through his hair, trying to sound casual. "I just saw a stray dog. Figured I'd take a look." Mason raised an eyebrow. "By yelling at a 6-year-old?" Chase flushed pink. "I didn't yell." "You commanded," Mason corrected. "There's a difference." The boy shifted his weight, uncomfortable. He glanced at Hunter, then away again. "Look, it's just a dog," Chase muttered. Mason's eyes sharpened. "No, he's not just a dog. He's a living creature. And that," he gestured to Hannah, "is not just a child. She's a citizen of this town." Chase stared at his boots. Hunter remained motionless, watching. Hannah pet the puppy's head gently, whispering something only he could hear. Mason spoke again, tone calm but firm. "Chase, there were reports of you wandering around the bus station earlier today, with disruptive intent. Someone called 911. Chase's head snapped up. "What? Who? That's ridiculous." Mason shook his head. "I'm not here to debate. I'm here because I respond when a child might be in danger." He gestured gently. "Step back, Chase." Slowly. Chase obeyed. That moment was telling, because Chase wasn't afraid of Mason's gun or his badge, but of the seriousness in Mason's tone. He had been scolded before, punished before, but never held accountable like this. As Chase backed up, Hunter matched his movement, pacing sideways, maintaining his post between Hannah and the teenager. It wasn't aggressive, it was mathematical, precise distance control. Chase swallowed. "Look, I didn't mean anything bad." Mason nodded. "Then there will be no issue cooperating." He didn't shout, he didn't threaten, he didn't escalate, and because of that, his authority carried more gravity. Hannah slowly rose to her feet, still clutching the puppy. Mason stepped nearer to her and asked softly, "Can I see him?" She hesitated, then opened her coat just a bit. Scout's nose stuck out, steaming warm breath into the cold. Mason's expression softened, but only briefly. He ran a gloved hand gently over Scout's head, checking for signs of injury. He noted the scar near the leg. Hunger signs, cold exposure. He looked back to Chase. "This dog needs warmth, medical attention, and safety, not fear." Chase said nothing. Mason pointed down the street. "Step over there, please, about 10 feet. Chase obeyed slowly. Hunter turned just enough to keep him in view. The dog didn't need permission. He simply knew his duty. And in the fading light of winter dusk, power shifted quietly. The kind that comes from law, and the kind that comes from loyalty. When Chase finally stopped, shoulders low, head down, Mason spoke a final, defining sentence, firm as frozen ground. "Do not approach the child again." And Chase, for the first time that evening, finally listened. Because the presence of Mason and the silent sentinel named Hunter made it unmistakably clear. This was no longer his game, nor his arena. He stepped back, not because he chose humility, but because the law stood before him, flanked by a dog whose calm gaze was a warning older than human justice. The kick did not land. The threat dissolved. The child remained safe. And the winter air, once stiff with tension, exhaled into still silence. The snow had begun to fall again, in softer flakes this time, drifting gently as Mason guided Hannah and the puppy toward the Silverpop police station. The building wasn't large, more like a sturdy municipal outpost than a precinct. A low brick structure with wide windows and a single flagpole half buried in frost. A warm yellow glow shone through the glass, contrasting the evening chill. Hannah stayed close to Mason's side, clutching Scout under her coat, while Hunter trotted beside them, every step deliberate and assured. Inside, the warmth hit immediately. heated air and the faint scent of old paper, coffee, and the clean tang of disinfectant. The fluorescent lights flickered once overhead. The lobby held only a receptionist's desk, 2 chairs, and a bulletin board dense with local notices. Snowplow schedules, lost cat posters, civic announcements. A few officers moved through the hall, each nodding toward Mason, but their eyes settled on the tiny girl holding an even tinier creature. It was then that a woman appeared from a back office, carrying a clipboard. Madeline Green. She was 50 years old, with short silver-white hair arranged in a tidy bob, glasses that sat low on her nose, and a face lined with the kind of wrinkles formed not by age alone, but by decades of listening, caring, and absorbing other people's sorrows. She was tall, perhaps 5'8", slender in build, but with a graceful sturdiness, like someone who had spent many years bending down to speak eye level with children, but always able to stand straight again. Madeline was Silverpop's senior social worker, a professional who had seen every shade of hardship the town concealed beneath its quiet facade. She was known for being kind but never gullible, patient but stern when required, and someone who believed deeply in the resilience of human hearts, especially small, frightened ones. Madeline approached slowly, kneeling down so her gaze met Hannah's. Her voice, gentle and round like warm wool, asked, "Sweetheart, can you tell me your name?" "Hannah," the child whispered. "That's a pretty name," Madeline said. "And who is this?" She nodded toward the small face peeking from Hannah's coat. "He's Scout," Hannah answered. She had chosen the name without hesitation because it felt right, as though the puppy had already been searching for something and had finally found it. Madeline smiled. "Well, hello, Scout." She extended a hand for the puppy to sniff, then stroked him gently. Her touch was practiced, careful, calm, reassuring. "We're going to help both of you warm up now, okay?" Hannah nodded slowly, but her arms did not loosen around the pup. Mason spoke from behind them, tone formal. "We're filing this under juvenile incident and animal welfare. I'll complete the report, but I wanted to make sure Ms. Lowe was processed safely." Madeline looked up at him and gave a small nod. "Good. We'll need to ask her a few questions and make sure she's all right." Then she placed a hand on Hannah's shoulder. "We're not taking him away, sweetheart. We just need to keep him warm and check if he's hurt." The words had an effect. Hannah reluctantly loosened her grip. Scout blinked at the room, still shivering occasionally, but already calming in the heat. Mason guided them through a short hallway into the break room, a small space with 2 couches, a table, and a humming vending machine. A heater hummed in the corner, releasing steady warmth. Hunter immediately curled near the door, silent sentinel at rest. Madeline sat beside Hannah and asked with soft patience, "Were you alone out there? Is someone expecting you home?" Hannah bit her lip. "Daddy's working at the mill. He doesn't come home until late." Madeline nodded thoughtfully, noting the detail. "And the dog, where did you find him?" "Under the fence," Hannah answered. "He was shaking, so I took him." Madeline scribbled a few notes, humming gently under her breath, a habit she had developed when thinking. "You did the right thing," the woman said kindly. "Not everyone stops when they hear someone crying." She emphasized the word someone, treating the dog's suffering as real as a person's. The puppy had by now settled in Hannah's lap, having been given a towel warmed from the heater. He nuzzled into it, blinking contently. Hunter observed with a steady gaze, approving. Mason prepared a cup of hot cocoa for Hannah, stirred with a plastic spoon. She wrapped both hands around it, absorbing the warmth. "Thank you," she whispered. Mason sat across from her. "Hannah, is there someone else at home besides your father?" She shook her head. "Just me." "And your mom?" His tone was gentle. Hannah stared at her shoes. "She doesn't live with us anymore." The crack in her voice said enough. Madeline gently redirected. "All right, tonight we're going to make sure you get home safely. And that Scout gets care and food." Hannah looked up with a flash of worry. "Does he have to stay here?" Mason leaned forward, forearms on his knees. "For tonight, yes. But only so we can make sure he's warm and checked by a vet in the morning. You can visit him tomorrow. You're not losing him." Hunter, as if on cue, stood and approached Scout, lowering his head to touch noses. The moment was quiet, but thick with meaning, an old protector acknowledging a young one. Scout's tail responded with a hesitant wag, the first full wag of his short life. Hannah observed the exchange with wonder. "They know each other?" she asked. Mason smiled faintly. "Dogs don't need introductions the way we do." Madeline stood and stretched lightly. "Okay, I'll file this with Child Services records so everything remains official. Mason, would you mind taking Hannah home after we settle the pup?" "Of course," Mason replied. As Madeline left the room, Mason turned back to Hannah. "This station can take care of him tonight. He'll have food, water, warmth, and Hunter will be here." The mention of Hunter made Hannah relax a degree. If that dog was guarding Scout, then Scout would be safe. Hannah stroked the pup's head, lingering for a final moment. Then Mason asked softly, "Hannah, would you like Scout to stay here tonight so we can take care of him?" She hesitated only a moment, then nodded. And in that nod, that tiny, brave gesture, Hannah learned something important. Sometimes love means letting someone rest where they are safe, even if you can't be beside them. The courthouse of Silverpop was not a grand marble institution, but a functional old building with wooden beams and slate-gray stone tiles that had weathered decades of winters. Snow fell outside in soft curtains, drifting over the steps and swirling around the railings like ghostly ribbons. Inside, the air was warm and smells of old paper, polished wood, and distant coffee clung to the space. It was the kind of room where justice felt personal, where everyone likely knew everyone else. On this particular morning, the juvenile hearing for Chase Langford was set to begin. Chase arrived with his father, Gregory Langford. Gregory was a man in his early 50s, tall and sharply dressed, with a custom-tailored charcoal suit, silver tie, and black gloves of fine leather. His hair, once golden like Chase's, had turned steel gray. His face bore lines that suggested business stress, ambition, and impatience. Gregory was a wealthy figure in Silverpop, owner of Langford Car Imports, a dealership that had connections extending beyond the town limits. He had long believed that money solved problems, smoothed surfaces, and purchased forgiveness from inconveniences. He did not look at his son with affection, more like an investment that had temporarily underperformed. Chase himself sat stiffly at the defense table, wearing a navy sweater and dress pants. He looked younger in this room than he had in the street that night, his arrogance shaved away by legal daylight. The bravado that thrived on darkness and isolation wilted beneath solemn eyes and official procedures. Every few minutes, he glanced toward his father, not for approval, but for orientation, as if Gregory's posture was his compass. On the other side of the courtroom, Mason sat beside Hannah and Madeline Green. Mason wore a pressed uniform, posture upright, tone respectful but resolute. Hannah sat quietly, legs dangling from a bench meant for adults. She wore a clean coat borrowed from the station, lost and found, pale blue, slightly too large. Scout, of course, was not allowed in court. He was at the station with Hunter, warm and safe. But Hannah mentally carried him in spirit, like a heartbeat in her mind. Judge Barrett presided over the courtroom. He was 61, with a broad build and white mustache, wearing rectangular spectacles that lent him an air of stern clarity. He had served Silverpop's court system for over 30 years, known for fairness, and an unshakable intolerance for arrogance. He believed in guiding young offenders onto better paths, rather than condemning them permanently. But he also believed in accountability. He rapped his gavel gently. Court will come to order. The proceedings began with standard reading of incident reports, witness accounts, and official documentation. The clerk read aloud footage from the bus depot camera showing Chase earlier that afternoon, the 911 caller's statement reporting his behavior, Mason's field notes, Madeline's assessment, weather conditions at the time, even a veterinarian's initial note diagnosing mild frostbite risk to Scout. Chase's father shifted uncomfortably. He had not expected such thorough presentation. He had assumed a quiet, contained matter. This was not quiet. When Judge Barrett invited the prosecution to speak, Mason stood. "Your Honor," he began, voice calm and measured, "I did not witness Chase beat the dog or physically injure the child, but I did witness an attempt to threaten and frighten a juvenile, and his intent to strike the animal, which was only prevented by intervention. The circumstances show disregard for the welfare of a child and a living creature. The community deserves assurance this behavior will not repeat. Chase's father rose stiffly. Your Honor, with all due respect, these accusations are blown far out of proportion. My son is not a criminal. He is a spirited adolescent. He was only— Judge Barrett lifted a hand, silencing him effortlessly. Gregory sat down, jaw tensing. Madeline Green spoke next. I had evaluated Hannah afterward. She shows signs of emotional stress and protective anxiety. Her actions were heroic, but her experience was traumatic. She should never have had to step between harm and another being at her age. All eyes turned briefly to Hannah. She sat small but composed, looking down at her hands clasped over her lap. Finally, Chase was invited to speak. He stood slowly. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I was just messing around. I got angry. I don't know why. His voice cracked on the last word. He looked at Hannah, and this time, shame flickered in his eyes. I'm sorry. It was not eloquent, but it was real. The judge considered him for a long moment. Silence settled like snow on stone. Then Judge Barrett leaned forward. Chase Langford, you come from privilege. That privilege has perhaps given you the mistaken belief that you stand above consequences. But I do not see a lost cause here. I see a young man who needs guidance. He removed his glasses. This court will not deliver punishment for punishment's sake. It will deliver responsibility and growth. He pronounced, you will serve 6 months of community service at the Silver Pop Animal Rescue Center. You will participate in behavioral empathy training and animal care education. Every word landed like a small stone on Chase's conscience. You will also attend therapy sessions with Dr. Milton Glass, a licensed psychologist, to address impulse control and anger responses. And you will meet regularly with youth counselor Rebecca Hayes. Gregory rose again. Your Honor, surely we can arrange— The judge stared him down. Sir, your money will not buy exemptions in this courtroom. Your son needs lessons, not insulation. Gregory exhaled sharply but sat, defeated by moral force rather than legal constraint. Judge Barrett concluded, Chase Langford, this is not a sentence of suffering, but of awakening. You will learn compassion, you will learn accountability, and you will learn the dignity of caretaking rather than controlling life. He struck his gavel once. The sound echoed, a clean, crisp punctuation. Chase sat there a moment longer, absorbing, then slowly nodded. Perhaps for the first time in his adolescent life, he understood that consequences could heal rather than merely punish. And outside, through the frosted windows, snow continued to fall, not as judgment, but as quiet absolution. 3 months passed, though in Silverpop time, it felt more like 3 winters stitched together. The snowstorms had come and gone. The wind had sung its long, white lullabies, and gradually the season began to shift. But even as drifts lessened and icicles thinned, the strange, quiet beauty of the town remained. Silver skies, humble homes, and familiar faces wrapped in scarves. During those months, many things changed for many people, but especially for Hannah. After the court ruling, Mason did not adopt Hannah immediately. The law would not permit such impulsive transitions. Instead, he became her legally designated temporary guardian. The legal form used the formal phrase custodial provisional guardianship, but in practice, it simply meant Hannah would live with Mason, with oversight from Child Protective Services, case reviews, and structured welfare visits. Madeline Green remained a watchful eye, not intrusive, but present, offering guidance when needed, ensuring Hannah's well-being was not just imagined, but documented. Mason prepared his home for Hannah before she arrived. His house was modest, a 2-bedroom bungalow with pale green siding and a small porch, situated 2 blocks from the police station. The interior held the quiet calm of someone who didn't collect clutter. Books neatly shelved, blankets folded, boots arranged by the door. He set up Hannah's bedroom with new sheets, soft coral pink with tiny white stars, a small desk, a lamp shaped like a fox, a shelf for stuffed animals, though he didn't yet have any to place there. The first day Hannah entered, she stopped in the doorway, eyes wide, and whispered, "Is that Mine? Mason answered gently. Yes, it's yours. Hunter seemed to take on the role of mentor to Scout in these months. At night, Scout would snuggle close to him, sleeping like a young student against a wise guardian. Hunter was now Hannah's nighttime sentinel, always curled either at her door or beside her bed. He had bonded with her in a way that transcended ownership, a silent, instinctive devotion. Scout had grown stronger too. No longer the trembling little scrap of fur beneath the fence, he had become energetic, playful, and curious. At around 6 months old now, he had long limbs, oversized feet, and a youthful bounce that gave him a clumsy charm. His ears stood fully upright, one sometimes tilting sideways like a question mark. He loved racing through the yard, chasing swirling snowflakes, or playing tug-of-war with his rope toy. His personality was gentle, endlessly affectionate toward Hannah, with occasional bursts of puppy mischief, such as stealing socks or attempting to nap on Mason's boots. Mason observed the transformations in Hannah as well. She spoke more now, asked questions, expressed preferences, hummed songs while coloring at the kitchen table. Her laugh, once muffled, became audible, bright even. She started, attending school regularly again, riding in Mason's police SUV in the mornings. At first, her classmates eyed her curiously, the little girl who lived with Officer Reed. But soon she blended into the crowd, carrying stories of Hunter and Scout that charmed even the most reserved kids. Little by little, the leftover shadows of Hannah's past, abandonment, silence, uncertainty, faded. One evening, as twilight stretched through the windows, Hannah was on the living room floor, building a Lego house. Scout lay beside her, gnawing on a toy, while Hunter stayed near the fireplace, stretched out but alert. Mason stood by the window, sipping tea, watching the town breathe soft winter breath outside. He turned to see Hannah carefully placing a tiny door onto her Lego house. "Look, Mason," she said. "This is the front door, because every house needs one." Mason smiled. "So, people can come in?" Hannah shook her head thoughtfully. "No, so people inside know they're not trapped, that they have a way out if they ever need it." Mason paused, surprised by the wisdom behind the words. Then he responded softly, "Sometimes having a way in matters too. So people can find you, so help can reach you." Hannah nodded slowly. Then she reached for Scout's paw and held it. "Scout found his way in," she said, "and Hunter too." Hunter, hearing his name, looked over with solemn amber eyes. Mason set down his tea and joined them on the floor. "I think I also found a way in," he said. Hannah glanced up at him, then leaned carefully against his arm, small shoulder pressing gently into him. That simple gesture, unforced, natural, sealed something unspoken. Later that night, after Hannah fell asleep in her starry bedspread, Mason stood at her doorway. The sight of her, safe, warm, peacefully dreaming, washed over him like quiet snowfall. Hunter lay beside her bed, head resting over his front paws, eyes half-lidded but attentive. Scout slept near Hannah's legs, curled like a fuzzy punctuation mark at the end of a sentence. Mason whispered to Hunter, "Good boy. Keep them safe." Hunter blinked once, slow and assured. The months continued, the cold melting into a gentler late winter. Trees remained bare, but light lingered longer each evening. Hannah helped Mason with chores, feeding the dogs, drying dishes, writing little grocery lists with clumsy letters. They fell into rhythm, mornings of school and work, afternoons of homework and play, evenings of shared meals. Meanwhile, Chase Langford worked at the Animal Rescue Center as ordered. At first he was resentful, scrubbing floors and cleaning cages. But gradually, through interaction with animals seeking trust and care, something inside him softened. He changed quietly, though that is a different story. Back in Mason's house, on the final day of Hannah's 3rd month living with him, Madeline Green visited for a routine welfare evaluation. She walked through the house, checking safety requirements, assessing Hannah's emotional state, observing interactions between child and caregiver. At the end, she met Mason privately in the kitchen. "You're doing well," she said. "She's thriving. You've made a good home." Mason nodded, but his voice was humble. She's done much of the healing herself. I just provided space. Madeline gave him a long, soft smile. Sometimes space and safety is all a child needs to grow again. When the evening came, Hannah, Hunter, and Scout played in the snow-covered yard. Hannah threw a stick. Scout dashed after it. Hunter watched with dignified patience. Mason leaned against the porch column, hands in pockets, watching them. There, in that moment, the world felt whole. No blood tied them, no biology, but something deeper. Under the fading winter sky, Mason understood. Some families are written not in DNA, but in acts of love chosen deliberately. Hannah laughed, loud and pure, as Scout returned proudly with the stick. Hunter circled her, tail swaying like a flag of loyalty. And there, beneath Silverpop's quiet winter, a family had indeed taken shape, not from inherited ties, but from the gentle, unstoppable force of chosen love. In the quiet ending of this story, we are reminded that the miracles of God do not always arrive in thunder or bright signs. Sometimes they come softly through the loyalty of a dog who refuses to give up, through the courage of a child who chooses love instead of fear, and through the healing strength that God places inside ordinary hearts. In our everyday lives, we each face moments where we feel small, unseen, or afraid. But God walks beside us even then, guiding our steps, sending comfort in unexpected forms, and reminding us that we are never alone. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who may need a little hope today. Leave a comment below to tell us your thoughts, and type Amen if you believe in the quiet miracles that God sends. May God bless you and your loved ones with peace, protection, and strength. And please remember to support this channel by pressing subscribe so we can continue bringing stories of faith, compassion, and healing to you and many others.